Hello, and thank you for watching Gray Mars. Seniors and not the high school kind are the fastest growing population of cannabis users, a trend that illustrates what a long, strange trip the legalization movement has been. The share of over 65 Americans who have used marijuana nearly tripled in a decade, from 11% in 2009 to 32% in 2019. According to a respected federal review on drug use, more than half of the 60 to 64 demographic reported cannabis use, another sharp increase. What a surprise. Cannabis consumption among older adults reached 35% in 2021, but a pandemic affected the survey methodology. Researchers said possibly skewing the results. The grain of cannabis culture signals broadening social acceptance of marijuana, which is now available for recreational use in 23 states. It is also a generational story about the aging baby boomers, a generation that grew up in the era of psychiatric experimentation. Cannabis use for many older Americans is less about getting high and more about getting sleep and pain relief and calm. There are many things that I would not want to do anymore if I didn't have cannabis, said Daniel Uth, 61, who lives and works on a Wisconsin farm. I wouldn't do it because it hurts so much. Cannabis users find that rolling the occasional joint can blunt pain from arthritic joints, old broken bones, and aching backs and necks. Use smokes a little bit recreationally, maybe once a month, but way more for pain control. Older Americans remain far less likely than younger Americans to use cannabis regularly. Roughly 5% of over 65 Americans and 10% of the 60 to 64 age group reported using marijuana in the past month, as of 2021, compared to 24% of adults 25 and under. Wu suspects that polls understate the true number of older adults who consume cannabis. Some skittish boomers who use weed are not admitted in on surveys, he said. Since 2009, we've seen a big increase in cannabis use, prevalence across all age groups, all demographic groups, with older people participating in that kind of for the first time, said William Kerr, a senior scientist at the nonprofit alcohol research group who also studies cannabis. Older Americans embrace cannabis brings them more in line with the rest of the nation. Half or more of adults in every other age group now say they've tried marijuana at least once. This year, for the first time, pollsters found that half of Americans have tried marijuana. The figure comes from a long running poll which found that 34% of adults had tried marijuana in 1999 and 4% in 1969. Young adults raised in a relatively pot friendly are leading the charge. More than two-fifths of adults aged 19 to 30 now use cannabis at least on occasion, according to federal data. Cannabis users may soon be the majority among young adults in several states where marijuana has been legalized. Older adults have been slower to accept legal weed, let alone smoke it. As recently as last fall, only 30% of Americans over 75 supported legalizing recreational marijuana. That quote reflects the views of the silent generation, Americans born between 1928 and 1945, a group that came of age before recreational weed had taken hold. It's really the silent generation, and every generation before that, Kerr said. They weren't exposed to it when they were young and had negative opinions about it for many years. Boomers bring a different perspective. In a survey, 53% of Americans in 65 to 74 age group supported recreational marijuana, close to the national average. Many boomers entered adulthood in the 1970s, a high watermark of marijuana use among young adults. In 1979, 36% of American ages 18 to 25 said they had smoked pot in the past month. As you were going through high school and college, it was there, said Brendan, CEO of a plant based wellness company. There was a segment of folks who used it, tried it, a segment of folks who were all around it. Marijuana use plunged in the 1980s amid the federal war on drugs and rose only fitfully in the decades that followed. Many boomers abstained from cannabis use in those years. It was mostly illegal, hard to procure, and risky to use. Even as states began to legalize marijuana for recreational use, starting with Washington and Colorado in 2012, the generational stigma endured among older Americans. Some of them were completely against it, even up until 5 or 10 years ago. Completely against it, never used it. Kimberly Cargill, CEO of Therapeutic Alternative in Sacramento, California, and co-owner of 7 other dispensaries. The conversation really changed when cannabis became mainstream and their children started educating them about it. The advent of recreational dispensaries with counter service and daytime hours was a game changer for boomers, many of whom winced at the thought of meeting a dealer in a fast food parking lot at twilight. It's become the craft beer industry, Dory said. All of a sudden, the boomer generation is saying, I can trust this now. Cargo Sacramento dispensary caters to an older clientele. Many customers are boomers, beset with aches and pains, looking for natural medicines to supplement prescription drugs or to wean themselves off alcohol. Just about anybody over 45 has some kind of chronic pain, said Cargyle, who is 43 and who introduced her mother in law to therapeutic cannabis. That's our demographic, I say. We're the place you can bring your mom and your mom's mom. Older cannabis users bring their own sensibilities to the marketplace. They are more likely than younger customers to choose edibles, tinctures, capsules, or salves, as opposed to vaping or smoking, according to Cargyle and others in the industry. Thank you for watching Gray Mars. Please like, share, and subscribe.